order. My apologies to all of our witnesses for the technical difficulties that we experienced today, but we appreciate your patience, and we will now move and get the meeting underway. Welcome to meeting 89 of the Standing Committee on International Trade. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders, and therefore members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. We have just now started, Mr. Savard Tremblay, we have just started this minute. I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those online, please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For interpretation online, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. I ask all participants to be careful when handling the earpieces in order to prevent feedback, which can be extremely harmful to interpreters and cause serious injuries. Please speak only into the microphone your headset is plugged into, and place earbuds away from the microphone when they are not in use. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can and appreciate your patience and understanding. If any technical issues arise, please let me know immediately, and we will suspend in order to ensure interpretation is properly restored. All members have received a copy of the draft budget from the clerk. Is the committee in agreement to adopt the budget for the study of Canadian businesses and supply chains and global markets in the amount of $38,900? Is everyone in agreement to adopt the budget? Opposed? It's carried. There we go, Madam Clerk. We try to be quick when we can. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, October 17th, 2023, the committee is beginning its study of Canadian businesses and supply chains in global markets. We have very patient people with us today from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, Sarah Wilshaw, Chief Trade Commissioner, and David Hutchinson, Director General Trade, Portfolio Strategy and Coordination, and from Export Development Canada, Mayred Levry, President, Stuart Bergman, Vice President and Chief Economist. Welcome all. We will start with opening remarks and then proceed with rounds of questions. Ms. Wilshaw, I invite you to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to address. Sorry?
Madam Chair, I'm just wondering what we're doing. We have two panels, but we only have an hour. How are we going to run the meeting today?
So I'd like to suggest if we could extend, we do have resources to extend the meeting until as late as 6:30 if the committee chooses to go along that line. I see Mr. Cannings is ready for something different than a committee that late. What about going till 6 p.m.? So we could
have to drive and attend the event, committed constituency related.
Officials again? Yeah.
Which means we're going to have to invite the officials back again. Well, I have to tell you, we have a huge amount of people who, in companies and so on, who have indicated an interest in this study. And so we'll take the time. So we'll go to 6 p.m. Is everybody in agreement with that?
They said no.
Well, I was looking over here and I was trying not to look at you.
Well, as you know, I'm always very courteous to my colleagues, so
you are.
I'm going to defer to them. But I would suggest that if we're not going to go to 6 or 6:30, that we use the first panel for the hour that we have and dismiss the second panel and apologize that they've come, but we're not going to be able to hear from them today. That's what I would propose.
That's a good suggestion, Mr. Seeback. All right. So to our second panel, we will have to invite you back as soon as the clerk can get that coordinated. And we will just go forward with the current panel that we have before us. And we will adjourn at 5:30. Okay? All right. Okay, everybody's in agreement. Thank you very much. Ms. Wilshaw, we're back to you for 5 minutes of opening remarks, please.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. As noted, I'm Sarah Wilshaw. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister of International Business Development, Investment and Innovation at Global Affairs Canada. I'm also the Chief Trade Commissioner. That means that I lead a network of almost 1,000 employees at Global Affairs Canada who serve Canadians from over 150 locations around the globe, as well as 600 employees in 14 offices across the country. I'm very pleased to speak about how the Trade Commissioner Service, or the TCS, you'll hear me say TCS, the Services Délégués Commerciaux, ou SDC en français, support the integration of Canadian businesses into global value chains. The TCS is a client service organization, first and foremost, that we aim to support the sustainable and equitable growth of Canada's economy by providing free services, support and funding to qualified Canadian exporters and innovators, educational institutions, and foreign investors. With nearly 2/3 of Canada's GDP linked to international trade, our work helps to make Canada's trade and economy more resilient. Le SDC génère des réels résultats économiques pour le Canada. Au cours de l'année fiscale 2022-2023,
the organization generates real economic results for Canada. In fiscal year 2023, the TCS provided over 52,000 distinct services to more than 11,000 Canadian businesses and clients. With that support, those clients achieved over 1,000 new international business deals and partnerships with an estimated value of $4 billion.
A total of $16 billion and over 13,000 new jobs in Canada. Foreign multinationals are actually a really important part of the Canadian economy, accounting for over 60% of trade in goods and services. Not only does FDI contribute significantly to Canada's integration into global supply chains, but it also strengthens our domestic supply chains by acting as a stable source of demand for Canadian industry suppliers. It should be noted that the TCS shares this mandate with Invest in Canada and with provinces, territories, and municipalities to promote FDI into Canada, just as we share the mandate to support exports with a number of other government departments, EDC, CCC, and provincial and territorial counterparts. We know that Canadian companies that use TCS services export to nearly 25% more markets. They export 11.2% more product varieties, and they earn 19.8% more value than non-clients. And I should add that, of course, Canadian imports and Canadian direct investment abroad are not part of the core mandate of the Trade Commissioner Service. We are outward-facing and inbound investment primarily. In terms of trade diversification, en 2018, le gouvernement du Canada a lancé la stratégie de diversification des
In
exportations.
2018, the Government of Canada launched the Export Diversification Strategy with a goal of increasing Canada's overseas exports by 50% by 2025. Canada is on track to meet that target with the help of TCS.
That export outside of Canada vers plusieurs marchés sont moins vulnérables aux perturbations des chaînes.
Businesses that export outside Canada into multiple markets are less vulnerable to supply chain disruptions and to sudden changes in demand.
Our services can make the difference for a Canadian business successfully entering a new market. And in addition to diversifying where we do business, where we export, the TCS is also committed to diversifying who trades by providing targeted support for traditionally underrepresented groups in trade. This work is all in the service of helping Canadian businesses to integrate into global supply chains that will define key and emerging sectors of the future and promote Canadian prosperity. Soutenir l'expansion des entreprises canadiennes dans le secteur d'intérêt.
Supporting Canadian businesses expanding in high-growth sectors of interest across the globe, such as the green and digital economy, is also in line with our commitment on responsible business conduct, as highlighted in our RBC strategy.
To build on these successes, the TCS Canadian Technology Accelerator and some of our other flagship programs have been expanded to help more entrepreneurs to find investors and customers and partners in innovation hubs all around the world. We've also expanded the Canadian International Innovation Program to help Canadians commercialize their innovations through international partnerships. So, Madam Chair, I just want to end by highlighting the TCS work in the Indo-Pacific region in particular, given the strategy and the focus on that area. With over 350 trade commissioners already based in the region, providing thousands of Canadian businesses with services and support, we have long recognized the importance of the Indo-Pac for global economic growth And in support of that strategy, the TCS is organizing the Team Canada trade missions to the region. La première de ces missions commerciales à grande échelle a
The
eu
first
lieu
of these full-scale trade missions took place in Japan last fall, with a diverse delegation of 160 organizations covering a wide range of industries.
up to Malaysia, Vietnam, South Korea, Indonesia, and the Philippines in this year. So as noted, we do all of this alongside a lot of partners and a lot of folks who are engaged in the international trading and investment attraction space. So we know that increased international business for Canadian companies is key to our future prosperity and to our economic security, and we're proud to be helping Canadian businesses in that journey and look forward to adapting to their needs all along their journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wilshaw. On to Ms. Lavery, please, for 5 minutes.
Merci, Présidente et membres du comité, de m'avoir.
Thank you very much, members of the committee, for having invited me today to participate in this very important study.
I'm eager to discuss with you the work that we do to support Canadian businesses in supply chains and in international markets. I look forward to sharing data and insights on the context and the conditions in which Canadian businesses are operating. And I'm joined today by the EDC Chief Economist, Stuart Bergman. As Canada's export credit agency, we operate with a mandate to support and grow the country's export trade. We do this through a suite of financial solutions to help mitigate risks for Canadian exporters and investors, as well as through knowledge products like webinars and digital content. Together, these offerings give Canadian companies the tools they need to reduce financial risk and the capital to enter and invest in new markets with confidence and to grow internationally. As the committee may be aware, EDC operates on commercial terms, and throughout our 80-year history, we've been consistently profitable. We ensure complementarity with the private sector, both bankers and insurers. EDC's contribution to the Canadian economy relies on the hard work of exporters in virtually all sectors of the Canadian economy and all sizes of companies, from micro to large, as well as our underrepresented groups in trade. In order to best serve all of these businesses, we have 16 offices across Canada, from British Columbia to Nova Scotia. And to ensure we are meeting the country's exporters where they want to go and where we see the greatest potential for businesses and for the Canadian economy, we have 23 representations in international markets, with 3 more scheduled to open in 2024. EDC is putting feet on the ground in so many regions and markets worldwide, and it's because of the growing number of Canadian companies operating in those markets, as well as the potential of those markets. We are confident our medium and long-term plans will help make Canada and the world better through trade. In fact, last year, our economics team enlisted the support of Statistics Canada to help better understand the value proposition we provide to Canadian exporters. This seminal study found that Canadian exporters receiving EDC support generated 22% more revenue, had 15% higher employment, and 5% greater employee productivity than similar exporters who were not EDC customers. Still, as everyone in this room knows, Canadian businesses have faced many serious challenges for several years now. Although the direct effects of the pandemic and the war in Ukraine started to wane in 2023, we still saw high inflation, rising interest rates, another war, slowing domestic demand, and weaker than expected growth from our largest trading partner, the United States. These were real challenges that caused real difficulties for our customers. But at the same time, the breadth of international opportunities has never been greater, and at EDC we're working to ensure the country's exporters are primed to seize the opportunity. For example, we're expecting to see Canada's natural resources and world-leading clean technologies play a key role in the ongoing global energy transition. EDC is a steadfast supporter of this sector, having worked with more than 440 Canadian clean tech businesses in 2023. Together, we facilitated a record $12.2 billion in exports, foreign investment and trade development activities for these companies. We are also seeing new commercial partnerships in rapidly growing regions, giving Canadian exporters more reasons to diversify beyond our long-standing trade partners. To support this opportunity, EDC has devoted teams to the markets and the regions where we see local demand dovetail seamlessly with strong Canadian capabilities. Another significant opportunity lies in Canada's standing as one of the world's most agriculturally self-sufficient countries. This distinction means Canada's agri-food supply chain has a critical role to play in feeding an increasingly resource-constrained world. Given Canada's abilities and strong reputation in the sector, EDC selected it as one of our priority sectors alongside clean tech, advanced manufacturing, digital industries, as well as other natural resources. Je vous remercie de m'avoir accordé le temps pour partager quelques
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share a few
Thank
details
you for
about
inviting me
EDC
to share
and
some
international
information
trade.
and details, and I look forward to offering more information.
Right, on to our members, Mr. Martel, for 6 minutes, please. Mr. Martel?
Excusez. Merci d'être ici, oui.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much
for
for
the
being with us. Thank
patience
you as well for your
as well.
patience.
What interests
What
me
I'm
and
interested in
concerns me
and somewhat concerned with when it comes
the
to developing
development of
Canadian companies
businesses is the
is
ports,
the ports, especially
particularly
the Port of
Vancouver
Vancouver.
Port. I would have
I have
a
a question I'd like to
ask you.
put to you.
Ça va?
Is it okay?
Second here. Okay, start again and see if it is better.
Alors, merci d'être ici encore une fois.
Thank you very much for being with us once again. What I'm concerned about and what I would like to know is the state of Canadian ports, more specifically the Vancouver port. Has the situation in the Vancouver port harmed Canadian companies? Because we often hear that there are waiting lines, that it's long to load, and that the port could be modernized, and we're somewhat behind compared to other ports, specifically American ports. So my question is this: do you believe that currently, given the state of Canadian ports, are harmful to the development of Canadian companies? Madam Chair, I'm on the French channel. I'm
I
hearing
was
English
hearing the English
interpretation.
translation on the French channel. There's a problem with the broadcast.
French channel, the English channel was cleared now.
We'll get there, don't worry.
Okay. Who do you want to speak in English? Okay, Mr. Martel, can you speak something in English? I keep stopping your timer, by the way, so you're not losing your time.
What should I do?
Speak in English.
Je dois parler en anglais? I have to speak
I'm
in
not
English?
hearing French interpretation. Okay.
OK, là, présentement, vous m'entendez?
Can you hear the interpreter?
Right now, can you hear me? Right now, can you hear me? There's a man and a woman. There are two people interpreting.
Go ahead if you want. If you want.
One of the interpreters' mics is still on.
The interpreter's mics might still be on.
Very well, huh?
Yes, we have. It seems to be okay. Can you hear the interpreter now? The interpreter should only be heard in English at this point. Can you hear the interpreter in English?
I'm going to make a suggestion. I'm going to ask you to start all over again because your time has been interrupted several times. So let's just get you started with your 6 minutes.
OK. Alors, je peux parler en français?
So may I speak in French?
OK. Est-ce que je dois recommencer? Parce que
Should I start over?
ce qui me préoccupe,
What I'm worried about
le développement des entreprises canadiennes,
in developing Canadian companies
les ports,
is the situation of the ports in Canada.
beaucoup avoir pris de retard comparativement
They seem to lag
aux ports sur
far behind other ports, specifically those in the United States. So my question is this: are Canadian ports, specifically the one in Vancouver, are these undermining the development of Canadian companies?
So thank you very much for the question. I did understand. I am not hearing from our clients about this, so I can't speak to.
We're not getting the English translation. Today is like the first day back from a year away or something, that nothing is working right today. Okay. All right. Okay. Miss Wilshaw, would you like to finish? Are you completed your answer to that question?
Very, very briefly, I would just say that that's probably a question better suited for Transport Canada, who I believe are on the second panel. I'm after all of that.
OK. Bon. Écoutez, moi, j'aimerais vous parler
Now,
du Fonds national.
I would like to speak about the Trade Quarter Fund, which is supposed to service ports as well as companies, and which should increase trade in Canada, that is the NTCF. This fund was created in 2007 with Mr. Garneau. From what I understand, the sum inside the amount of the fund is such that people no longer have access because the money seems to continue to disappear. And people complain because it appeared to be a good fund.
Thank you again for the question. Unfortunately, again, I'm going to have to defer to my colleagues at Transport Canada because they manage the National Trade Corridors Fund, and I don't have any visibility onto that or the requests that have been made.
OK. J'avais beaucoup
Apologize.
I know, j'avais beaucoup de questions sur le port de Vancouver, oui.
I know I had a lot of questions on the Port of Vancouver. I believe that that was part of the development of international businesses and trade. Now, exports, Canadian development, EDC. I'd like to know which industries internationally, which sectors, that is, are the most in demand.
Sure. Their results as well. Madam Chair, what the top sectors that we see by number of services offered by the Trade Commissioner's Service, ICT with 17% of those 55,000 services that we offered last year, or 52,000, I should say. Agri-food is second, education, clean technologies, life sciences, and then it drops from there. Those are the priority sectors that are in demand. Mairead, for your side?
Translation problem again? Yeah, isn't it really?
I'm hearing something
now. Okay, okay, let's start again. Okay, Ms. Lavery, you have the floor for a moment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So perhaps I can split my answer into two, and certainly Stuart can add some more details. In terms of our exports today, they continue to be driven by energy commodities, and particularly agricultural commodities, metals, etc. Those are some of our big exporting sectors, including transportation. I think it's also worth noting that of Canada's exports today, 18% of them relate to services. So we have, when we look at exporting in general, 82% are goods and 18% are services. So very important to remember that. I think if your question was around where are the sectors of opportunity, it does go back to what many countries are framing now as energy security and food security. So lots of opportunities as it would relate to our minerals in particular with the electrification, energy, and of course our agricultural commodities for food. But there's lots more opportunities with respect to our manufacturing and indeed our data industries that you could find with quantum computing or AI. So and of course that's different by region and different by country, but many opportunities.
26 seconds. L'énergie, quand vous parlez d'énergie, est-ce que je pouvais être un petit peu plus...
In terms of energy, may I better understand what you mean by energy?
Yes, absolutely, Madam Chair. Energy refers to oil, gas, and other forms, biofuels, etc.
Okay, thank you very much. On to Mr. Sidhu for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to our witnesses for taking the time to join us here today. Look, I want to say thank you to the EDC and, of course, all the trade commissioners across the world and here in Canada. They do exceptional work on the ground. I've seen it firsthand. And I really want to kind of give Ms. Wilsha a chance to highlight some of the services that the Trade Commissioner Services provides to businesses, both here in Canada and across our network abroad.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. The Trade Commissioner Service helps exporters to reach foreign markets to sell products and services. We aim to provide clients with practical advice and intelligence on foreign markets to help them make better business decisions. The Trade Commissioner clients are Canadian companies who have meaningful economic ties to Canada and are looking to grow their business through exports. We offer 4 key services in all of the posts that we have. So as I mentioned, 150 locations around the world. We offer the 4 key services where we assess market potential. We develop market entry strategies along with the clients. We provide qualified lists of contacts and put them in touch with business opportunities. And we solve problems. So that's a big category. A lot of those are big categories. What we actually do is sit down with our clients, talk to them about how they would like to enter the international marketplace, what is their preferred method, where they would like to go, and then we try and also present opportunities to them for with businesses or opportunities that we have heard about from particular markets, and then talk about whether those are a good fit for their business, and put them together with the key players in the different markets, and hope that something succeeds out of that, and we're pretty good at it these days. So yeah.
Definitely great stories, some great progress in terms of helping businesses expand and into new markets around the world. Now, within our Indo-Pacific strategy, which we launched last year, it's a $2.3 billion strategy that we launched. Within that strategy, we committed to Team Canada trade missions, and you highlighted some of the trade missions that Minister Ng has been doing. The most recent one was in Japan. Can you speak to some of the successes from that trade mission and the impacts it has on the ground?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak about that, Madam Chair. At that mission, we had a pretty significant delegation of businesses there. We engaged in a lot of outreach as well prior to, so the team on the ground tries to set it up as best they can for the inbound businesses. And then we arrange a lot of B2B meetings, so business-to-business meetings, opportunities for the companies who are participating to sit down with local contacts who may have opportunities for them. And we've seen already some results, some NDAs, non-disclosure agreements that have been signed, some deals being pursued, and we're pretty excited about the prospects. We'll continue to follow up with the companies that participated in that, and of course the team in Japan is continuing to work with the local contacts as well.
Great. No, thank you. And I understand in 2018, the Trade Commissioner Services created a team to help Canadian businesses harness the impacts of Canada's free trade agreement. As you may be aware, this government has signed a record number of trade agreements in unlocking markets around the world, unlocking billions of consumers for Canadian businesses to access. Could you speak more to this work that the TCS team is doing in that service?
Sure, I'm happy to, Madam Chair. What we've been seeing there was at the beginning, and the reason why we entered into that sort of promoting the use of free trade agreements is that we spend all this time negotiating these free trade agreements, but there was a somewhat lower rate of utilization than we'd like to see. So people were effectively leaving money on the table, if you will. And maybe that was because they didn't know how to access the agreements or how the agreements could help them. So we decided that it would be useful to spend some time and energy and do some more work to make it easier. So since then, we've put out a number of videos and vignettes and tools and training to help people to access and understand the free trade agreements. And we have seen the utilization rates actually increase. So we are seeing that the FTAs are being used. We're also using the FTA data to up our own game in terms of if somebody comes to us and says, I'm interested in exporting something to France, we might be able to say that there's another market that is perhaps better for them, more suited for them, or where they would have a better advantage given the FTAs that we have in place.
Well, thank you for that. And turning over to Ms. Lavery, thank you so much for being here today. Part of my role before politics for 13 years as an international trade consultant was making sure that businesses know how to utilize these trade agreements. Within our Indo-Pacific strategy, we've announced an agriculture and agri-food office opening in Manila, Philippines. Could you speak to how that would be a benefit to some of your clients?
Yes, absolutely, Madam Chair. To respond, so I think there's a few things that are very interesting to Canadian exporters. One is the presence on the ground, which gives them the visibility and the understanding of how business is done in those markets. So Trade Commissioners, very important presence on the ground, and indeed why we want to be there, together with then the opportunity to identify companies that need specific support in the market itself and how to help them grow their presence in the region. Specifically on agriculture, it is such a demand currently in the Indo-Pacific region, in the ASEAN region in particular, as many countries focus on food security. So anything that we can do to make it easier to actually import into those countries, particularly agricultural products, because they generally have more regulations associated with them from a health and safety perspective, is incredibly important. So again, it's about the ease of getting products to the market with the credibility that comes attached with that, with the Canadian brand. So again, having our presence in those countries allows us to work with local authorities, local regulators, local companies to encourage them to import more from Canada. And recent studies have shown that some of the growth opportunities are in those markets, in Vietnam, Bangladesh, other countries that have different standards than Canada. And we need to be ready to help our exporters get the products into those markets.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Rebonjour à l'ensemble des
Thank you, Madam
collègues.
Chair. Hello again to all of our colleagues. We're back after a month. Thank you very much to our witnesses for your attendance and for your presentations. My question, and again on my next, I'm going to ask EDC to answer the same question, but first I'd like to ask Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development. We know that a number of countries are bankrupt, some are autocracies, some are authoritarian regimes. How to ensure that government remains transparent in how it supplies these governments, or where it provides supplies to pays where the conditions are somewhat touchy?
Thanks for the question. And Madam Chair, I mean, it gives me an opportunity to speak about the responsible business conduct. I think that is the key element here. And talking about the expectations we have of the Canadian companies when they're operating abroad. We expect Canadian companies to abide by all relevant laws, to respect human rights, to adopt best practices and international guidelines on responsible business conduct. And so my organization, the Trade Commissioner Service, provides advice to clients on how to mitigate risks in some of the conditions that the member was describing, to strengthen their responsible business conduct practices. And we try to use that to make the companies both more resilient by enhancing awareness of production and supply chain risks, as well as operational, financial, legal risks. But we also see it as a competitive advantage for Canada. If our companies are out doing the right things around the world and are known to be responsible actors in the global marketplace, we believe that that increases the brand value and customer retention. And so we see that as a positive for the Canadian economy.
Mais quand vous dites, juste avant de passer la balle à exportation
But
développement.
before I turn over the question to EDC, you said that we expect that there be a responsible conduct on behalf of companies. But other than this expectation, is there anything you do to verify this? Could you perhaps shed light on the mechanisms you put in place to ensure that?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm happy to talk about how we handle allegations of misconduct. So when an allegation of misconduct is presented to us, when we hear about this, there are a number of different ways in which we can treat that. We start by reinforcing our expectations of the client, obviously, and then we have and can offer good offices under a couple of different avenues. There's, of course, the national contact point, which is established under the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises. There is also a mechanism for the CORE, which is the Canadian Ombudsperson for Responsible Enterprise, to have dialogues. But actually, there are some legal mechanisms in place as well. There are several legal avenues, such as the Corruption of Foreign Public Officials Act, which is a process we have for alerting the RCMP. And then there are other legal avenues, such as through the Extractive Sectors Transparency Measures Act, and the customs tariff, which made it illegal to import products made of forced labor. And so those are a couple of different tools that exist.
Madam Chair, I'll provide the answer for EDC. So I think it really starts first by talking to the companies and ensuring they understand that the items that you referenced actually can impact their long-term sustainability. So it starts with education of our Canadian companies and providing them the tools so that they can understand the risks that they might be getting into. So whether that's providing them information on how to consider forced labor or child labor in supply chains, giving them tools to assess that, that's incredibly important. So really trying to build up their knowledge and understanding. When it comes to being in receipt of EDC support and asking EDC to participate, then that triggers all of the due diligence, where we consider risk factors that include the sector of operation, the country of operation, or where the buyer might be located, as well then as the product itself. So we do quite an extensive set of due diligence that focuses on environment, it focuses on human rights, again, some of the examples, forced labour, the inclusion or the impact on local communities, as well then as financial crimes and all that entails. So it's a very comprehensive due diligence based on risk factors that we might see, so that we then can go and investigate deeper if we see any of those risk indicators in place.
Alors, bien, également, si on a le temps pour les deux réponses, ça sera bien également.
So I think it would be good to have time for those two answers. But we know that there was a bill that had been promised. It was part of the 2023 budget to ensure by the end of the year to completely eliminate forced labor in the supply chains. This bill did not arrive. We have, by the way, voted in the committee on a motion to ensure that the government remembers this promise. I'd like to ask this. Do these detailed mechanisms exist? And if so, why would this bill be necessary? And have you heard any news about whether or not this bill will be imminent?
I'm not sure if Madam Chair, if you're referring to S211, which came into, okay, you're talking about perhaps some legislation that ESDC was asked to bring forward.
En fait, on parle d'un engagement qui était dans le budget
This
2023.
was a promise in the 2023 budget where it indicated that by the end of the year we would have this bill.
What he is referring to. So Budget 2023 announced a commitment by the government to introduce legislation in 2024 to eradicate forced labor from supply chains. I think that's what we're referring to. And Employment and Social Development Canada is the lead on labor issues, which is the primary responsibility for this. They work closely with stakeholders and international partners to ensure a strengthened approach to tackling forced and child labor. Minister Ng has in her mandate letter commitments to support ESDC in coming forward and developing this legislation, and our teams are working together to do that.
Yes, on to Mr. Cannings for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to follow along the same line of questioning from Mr. Savard-Tremblay. You know, we had a study in this committee a year ago or so about responsible conduct of Canadian enterprises abroad. We had the minister, I believe, but we also had the ombudsperson for responsible enterprise here. And one thing she clearly said when she was here, and we're talking about Canadian reputation abroad that really affects our ability to export and import, was that when we asked how many cases she was working on, it was very few. And the reason she gave was that nobody's bringing cases to CORE because they don't have powers. They don't have powers to bring in witnesses. They don't have powers of to get documents. And so the people interested in bringing these cases forward would go elsewhere. They'd go to the UN or whatever. And I'm just wondering if there's been if you heard of any pressure from within government to give the ombudsperson those powers so that she could do the job we all expect her to do and she wants to do.
Well, thanks for the question, and I do recall that study from this committee, and of course we paid close attention to it at the time. And as you know, the CORE, the ombudsperson, was appointed in 2019, and so part of the early days of that office was setting up the procedures and so on, which I think part of the reason why perhaps there weren't a lot of cases in the early days as they opened their doors only fairly recently. As I understand it, and it's public knowledge, it's always posted, I think, quarterly on the CORE's website, there are currently 21 active cases, 5 in the intake phase, 6 in an initial assessment, 9 under investigation, and 1 where recommendations have been made to the company. And I've spoken to the CORE recently, and my understanding is that group is very busy these days, and is seeing some relatively good success with their efforts.
Well, I'm heartened to hear that because I believe they've been going for 4 years when we talked to them and had literally a handful of cases, and the reason given was these lack of powers. And so I'm hoping that those powers are still coming because I think it's so important for Canada's reputation abroad. Just now to completely change gears and talk more about what you can do to help Canadian companies, and I know you're outward facing, and so I'm trying to find examples. I have a riding with 6 border crossings, small border crossings, but so there's a lot of my companies in my riding do business with the United States especially. And I'm just wondering what supports you provide to them. I have, and hopefully some of them will be here testifying, like a small mine, a graphite mine that produces the best graphite you can imagine, but has difficulties exporting it because they face competition from Chinese companies in Mozambique, for instance. I'm just wondering what kind of help you provide those companies?
I'm really grateful for the question. The border cities and communities are incredibly important in this trade, space, and there, as you say, folks travel back and forth all the time. I myself was posted in the United States, so I understand that market fairly well. And how we work. And I can tell you, just even across the U.S. last year, we served almost 3,000 clients, and we delivered over 8,000 services to them, and we saw more than 100 successes. So, as I said earlier, what we try to do is sit down and understand the client's needs and concerns. And then if whatever the product is or the service is that they're looking to export, we try to find them the right kinds of tools and supports to help them to go internationally, whether that's referring them to our friends at EDC or some other organization that can give them that support, or advising them on local market conditions if we're concerned with risks, as Mr. Savard-Tremblay mentioned in certain jurisdictions. And so we really try to de-risk their approach to those markets by offering them tools, supports, alternatives, contacts, and opportunities as they come to us as well from all of the folks that we have on the ground around the world.
Did you want to add something, Ms. Lavery?
Quick, yes. 26 seconds remaining.
It's really important maybe to address your point about the competition. And one of the things at EDC that we're very clear about is working with other ECAs and with Department of Finance at our OECD level to ensure there is a level playing field for our Canadian companies. And that's particularly true in the financing space, which EDC would be more involved with, to ensure that our exporters have access to the same rates, same tenors, and the ability to get financing for their activities.
Thank you very much. Mr. Seaback for 5 minutes, please.
Great. Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Mr. Sidhu brought up the Indo-Pacific strategy, so I thought I would ask a couple of questions related to that. It was launched in November of 2022. In March of 2023, Professor Hugh Stevens wrote an article saying, while it's expected that some details will be lacking when a new comprehensive strategy is unveiled, the lack of specificity and details on the path to implement many of the IPS's elements is concerning. We're almost a year later, so I want to talk about some of these things that have been announced. Indo-Pacific Agriculture and Agri-Food Office, component of market diversification, $31.8 million over 5 years. What's the status of that? How much money's been spent? How many people have been hired?
So thank you for the question, and I can say I believe that the head of that office has been put in place. I did speak to her the other day, but this is an AAFC and Ag and Agri-Food Canada responsibility and lead. So they will be rolling out that office and getting it set up.
So to the best of your knowledge, it's one person.
To the best, I don't know. In fact, if there are more
but you
people
only know of one person.
At the moment, I know who the head of the office is.
So 18 months later, after the strategy's been launched, there's one person that's been hired. It's an impressive rate. Let's look at something else here. The Canadian Trade Gateway in Southeast Asia, 24.1 million over 5 years. So what's the status of that? How many people have been hired? How much money has been spent? And what's the spend over the next 3.5 years? Because we're a year and a half in.
Madam Chair, I can say that the work on developing what the gateway will look like and how it will serve outside of the Trade Commissioner service, because obviously we do not want to duplicate the services that already exist. So we are talking to folks who are interested in getting into the market about what will help them and what will be the most useful for them in terms of getting on the ground there. But again, this is the responsibility of others who are working towards that goal.
So it sounds to me like 18 months into the Indo-Pacific strategy, the Canadian Trade Gateway in Southeast Asia is we're just talking about doing some things. Is that an accurate assessment? Like nothing's been set up, no one's been hired, no money has been spent?
I believe it's still in the development phase.
Okay, thanks very much. Expanding natural resource ties with the Indo-Pacific region, 13.5 million over 5 years. Anyone have any idea of what the status of that is 18 months after the launch of the strategy?
Madam Chair, that's an NRCan lead. I wouldn't be able to speak to that.
What's the status of the ag office? Mr. Sidhu brought that up. You said the one person's been appointed. Is that what we talked about before? That was the same envelope of funding?
Madam Chair, I'm not an expert on what AAFC's process is or whether there were different envelopes there that they were accessing. I do know that the head of that office is in place. I do not know the status of the rest of her office, if she in fact has other people there or not, and that is again an AAFC lead.
One of the key regions or key partners in the Indo-Pacific is Japan. I understand you spent some time there in Japan. Would you say that LNG is something that Japan has been asking for from Canada?
I think it's very clear that they're involved and interested in accessing LNG.
And LNG in specific from Canada. They've asked Canada for LNG, is that correct?
They've made some investments in LNG in Canada.
And what's the current government's position? Are you aware of whether or not the government plans to export any LNG to Japan?
I'm not in a position to say that.
24 seconds remaining.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are all my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Welshaw, welcome to the committee. Whenever I travel abroad, I go to Canadian embassies, high commissions, and I always make it a point to meet the trade commissioners. In my view, they are the most important position in any Canadian mission. Our trade with the US is so big that to find information outside of North American market is very difficult for me to say how good, how bad, or how great the Trade Commissioner service is outside of North America is very difficult to access. Just a quick clarification before I go in further. You did mention that one person has been appointed under the Indo-Pacific strategy, the office that has been set up, but you actually don't know how many people have been employed. You can't know for sure. So it is possible that others are also being employed, but you may not be aware.
That is correct.
Okay.
It is Agriculture Canada.
Yeah. Now, were you part of the June 2022 Canada-US supply chain progress report?
No, sir. That is not a part
I
of
had
my...
questions about that. Because we are dealing with the supply chain. Are you involved? Are you aware of any reports on the items that are considered to be critical or essential under the supply chain scenario if pandemic hits again?
Madam Chair, I think that would fall to the Procurement Canada and also to ISED, who look at critical and vulnerabilities in our supply chain.
Oh, good. Thank you. Now, coming back to the Trade Commissioner's services, as I said, you mentioned, I'm glad to know that ICT is one of the biggest customers base of yours. But outside of North America, who are the top 3 biggest customers?
Madam Chair, the top outcomes I can speak to for the Trade Commissioner Service. The top outcomes by region are actually the Indo-Pacific is the #1 region for outcomes of the services that we provide in the Trade Commissioner Service to Canadian clients. After that, it is the U.S. and Mexico, and then Europe.
My question was that what percentage of Canadian companies, which are the top sectors within Canada who are looking to export outside of North America?
Oh, I see. I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question, Madam Chair. It's the same areas, as a matter of fact. The same sectors are the key sectors that we see. Although, as I think Madame Lavery mentioned, it does depend a little bit by market. So it would be hard to paint everything with a single
In any case,
brush.
the export
But-
outside of North America is so small that, even when we segregate. Coming back to, again, outside of North America, Canadian agriculture produce and agri-food products are the stars who have made Canada the fifth largest, they're the fifth largest exporters in the world. And whenever we sign any trade agreement, which we have signed many, that one sector which I notice sitting as the member of International Trade Committee, that they aggressively go after and try to expand their markets, their exports. But I have not been seeing that from other major sectors in Canada. For example, take the steel and aluminum sector. 90% plus of their export is just to North America, other than the domestic market in Canada. What is that you can do, or what is that those sectors, what is that we can do to motivate sectors like steel and aluminum to go after the new markets that where we have signed the free trade agreements?
Madam Chair, I think, this is a very good, important question to try and motivate people beyond the North American space. Obviously, that is where a lot of our clients want to start because it's an understandable market, it's a large market, it's a wealthy market, and there are a number of opportunities for Canadian businesses there. We try to encourage people to go not just to the United States, but beyond. Obviously, the U.S. is a big one. And so we do try, and we offer different services that help to de-risk that. As I mentioned, we have CanExport as well, which helps to do some co-funding, matching funding for people to explore new markets. But we also, as I mentioned as well, with the free trade agreements and the information that we try to put in front of clients to help them to understand how to use the free trade agreements and what the benefits are, and that we've gone and negotiated all of these, and we really like them to take advantage of them. We are seeing a strong utilization of those, and I think a lot of it comes down to education, and we work with a lot of partners all across the country, provinces and territories, as well as federal government partners, municipal partners, and our crowns as well, to put on webinars and all kinds of educative types of opportunities to help people understand how to use the FTAs, what the opportunities are for them around the world, and to try and encourage them to go as far afield as they possibly can. So these are some of the ways in which, not comprehensive, the trade agreements or the trade missions are another way, ways that we try to get people to explore new markets out there and show them that it's okay, that they can go farther than the U.S.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci. Alors, retournons, si vous le voulez bien, à l'automne
Thank you
2000.
very much. Let's go back to the fall of 2018. In the government fall economic statement, there was announcement of a strategy of diversifying trade. It was an increase of 50% of exports of Canada. That was stated objective by 2025. We're in 2024 now, so we're not far away. We're at 11 months from taking stock of this announcement. So as part of the strategy, the government had announced an investment of $1.1 billion over 6 years, beginning in 2018-2019 to facilitate access by Canadian companies to foreign markets. So first of all, have these investments been made?
Yes, so I'm happy to say that, Madam Chair, that we did receive and launch a whole strategy towards trade diversification back in 2018. We've been rolling that out, and we are fully staffed up in some additional resources that we received to support Canadian business around the world and through different mechanisms. And we are, I'm very happy to say, on track to achieving that 50% increase in trade with markets beyond the United States. So last year, goods and service trade hit a record high of $1.9 trillion, and that is on track.
Donc, vous confirmez à la fois le 1,1 milliard de dollars sur
But
6
you're
ans.
confirming the $1.1 billion over 6 years. All of this was invested, so you're confirming that. And the 50%, that is the increase of 50% by the end of this year, you're also confirming that. Is that correct?
Just to clarify, I think it is by 2025. Yes.
Oui, oui, c'est ça. Donc,
Oui, c'est
mais
ça.
là, on est en 2024, donc c'est d'ici la fin de l'année.
Yes, but we're in 2024, so it's by the end of this year. So both the investment and the increase in imports, you're confirming.
30 seconds remaining. You're good? On to Mr. Cannings for 2.5 minutes.
Well, thank you. And I'd just like to turn to Ms. Lavery to talk about EDC and supports for businesses. And, I think of EDC as an organization that supports big business with big help, pipelines, et cetera. Where is the lower end of that in terms of, as I was saying before, most of the businesses in my riding doing export business to the United States primarily are small businesses. I have a company, for instance, it happens to be the biggest lead acid battery recycler in Canada, in Western North America. It wants to expand that because competitors in the States have fallen by the wayside. They needed a small amount of money to make those expansions. And I'm just wondering where you fit into that and where BDC fits into that, or where should they turn for help like that?
Thank you for the question. I'm really excited actually by this question. I think at EDC there was a perception over a long number of years because we kept talking about EDC and the products that it provides. So we provide insurance to help make sure people get paid for the exports that they make. We also provide financing and capital to actually help the companies. But we really have been expanding in the last 5 years, where one of the most used products by our 80% small business users, because 80% of our customers are small and medium-sized businesses, is our knowledge product. So how do they get into markets? We work very closely with the Trade Commissioner Services on providing them tools and guidance and advice to actually how they export. BDC have a different mandate because it's the Bank of Entrepreneurs, so we're very focused on just the exporters. But we changed our whole organization to actually be structured by small companies, medium-sized companies, and large, so that the whole of the EDC team is focused on meeting the needs, which are very different between small companies versus medium versus large. So with our small companies, we find products that include our guarantees with their local bank, where we guarantee the working capital for exports. We find our credit insurance products are really well used by those companies because it provides working capital for them, versus very large companies that need a really different financial solution. So we've really tried to focus on making sure we understand the needs. We do lots of surveys. We do lots of customer promoter score surveys, as well as checkpoints with them to make sure that we're truly meeting their needs. I think in the small and micro space, it tends to be that they need help to actually build the capability within the company. So often, even some of the questions that we ask help them build their understanding of what they will need to do when they go to export. So we're very focused on meeting the needs by different segments.
Thank you very much. Mr. Baldinelli for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being with us this afternoon. I just want to build on some of the comments of my colleague here when he was talking about the Indo-Pacific strategy. There was also a commitment within that for trade missions abroad. It indicated about $100 million over 5 years to be committed to that. And so as we're 2 years in already, I was just wondering if you could provide Ms. Wilshaw like an update on that.
Yeah, Madam Chair, very happy to. The Team Canada trade missions are well underway. We run trade missions regularly. We did 2 last year outside of the Indo-Pacific. We ran to Chile and was Chile last year? I'm just checking with my colleague, but Chile and to the United Kingdom. But in terms of the Indo-Pacific,
Can
yes,
I
sir.
just stop you there? That's my area, for example. and I apologize for that.
Not at all.
I'm just looking at the Indo-Pacific Regional Capacity Uplift, which is $100 million over 5 years. Trade missions is a different fund. And I was just wondering, 2 years in, where do we stand on that?
The capacity uplift.
Yeah. New positions to significantly expand capacities at Canada's missions abroad and in Canada with the goal of advancing and defending Canadian interests in the Indo-Pacific.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm aware of the commitment, and it is being run by the geographic branch, which is a different part of Global Affairs Canada. That said, I can say that that some of the positions, particularly those that had to do with supporting clean tech, are under creation. There is a process to go through to develop the positions, to get them approved, to put them in place, and then to hire staff. So we have been in the process of engaging those folks for those positions and getting them in place.
So do you have a head count, for example, that you could provide with us? How much has been spent to date 2 years in?
I do not, and we could come back to you with that.
If you could, that would be great if you could share that information. Also, if I can just go further on in some of the services that are provided by the trade commissioner's offices. And you see, for example, the Can Export Innovation Program. And so I was guessing, it helps small and medium-sized firms, academics, institutions, non-governmental research centers in Canada to commercialize their technologies. And it talks about, programs help them pursue collective research and development projects with foreign partners, for example. Are there any rules in place with regards to IP protection, for example, on that is created through some of the funding that's provided by the federal government for this?
Madam Chair, as a matter of fact, there was a separate budget decision that allocated additional funding to Can Export specifically to support IP protection in international markets. And the team has been marketing that. We market our services, so we've been marketing that to try and get more companies to access that funding to help them to make sure that they know what the risks are and that they are utilizing all of the government supports and services to try and protect their IP. But in addition to that, if I may, Madam Chair, we have dedicated staff who help advise on IP risks in certain key high-risk markets.
Excellent. Now, would that same rule apply with the Canadian International Innovation Program as well?
So the innovation program is, Canadian International Innovation Program is designed to support co-innovation between partner countries. So we have science, tech, and innovation agreements with, I think, 15 different partners. And what we do is each comes to the table with a certain amount of money where we support research and development for the purposes of co-innovation and commercialization of new technologies. And so that funding is kind of is designed to support those kinds of activities.
Madam Chair, how much time?
40 seconds.
Just one quick question. Being on a border community myself, my home community, the notion, Mr. Canning had talked about it, I think my colleague had talked about it earlier as well, and you had mentioned it, about the whole educational component and letting small and medium-sized enterprises know of your services and how they can come forward and make use of your services. And it's like, I think that's one of the biggest detriments. They just simply don't know that the government has opportunities to assist. If you could just say provide some examples of what you do to share your information out there to the community.
I'm very happy to start, or did you mean to address that to Matt?
I'll start with EDC.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So one of the biggest forums is webinars, actually, and of course your website, because everybody wants digital and they want to access the resources when they 24/7. So we've been really structured at making that those resources available to people when they need it. And just last week we had a webinar with over 2,000 people on how to actually get started on exporting. So really, and we actually for the first time sort of co-promoted that with the Trade Commissioner Service, with many of the different Team Trade Canada, and it had a huge impact. Sorry, I see the chair waving at me.
Well, I'm trying to complete the round, and Mr. Sheehan has got the last 5 minutes, so thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation and your work on this very important file. I'm co-chair of Canada-Japan, and I've had the opportunity to speak with some of our Japanese parliamentarians. They were here in Ottawa in August. There are people that were here, the ambassador. They're very high on the Indo-Pacific strategy. They really are, and there's other countries that are as well. There's so much opportunity, and part of the Indo-Pacific strategy, there's also a process in which we're trying to promote peace and security in the area. In particular, some joint exercises with the military. You have Russia, Japan and Canada have put sanctions on Russia that are now running exercises in the what they call the Northern Territories. You have China in the South China Sea, the East China Sea. There's a lot of challenges, but we need to secure that. And in securing that, Japan has also realized the opportunities between Canada and Japan. It's just the Pacific Ocean, and it's free and clear. And they're very hungry right now, very, very hungry to do more. They're the largest direct investor from Asia. You've seen them now exploring Honda about EV batteries again, probably in Ontario, but who knows? But I would just like you to make some comments on the opportunities in the region, in particular to the businesses over here, because I will suggest to you, it's really well known over there. What are we doing to promote the Indo-Pacific strategy to our businesses and collaborators, the Canadian ones, to realize those opportunities that are there?
Well, thanks for the question on this. And Japan occupies a very special place in my heart. It was my first posting, and so yeah, very fond memories. And I can see a lot of change, as a matter of fact, in how how the relationship has progressed over the years, which is quite exciting. But in terms of how you bring those opportunities in front of Canadians, I think what Ms. Lavery was talking about as well in terms of the webinars. We do specific webinars on countries. We do them on specific sectors as well within those countries. We try to put our information out there as broadly as we can. Running the trade missions is a great way for folks to experiment and explore those areas. But trade missions aren't the only events that we run. We've got posts all across. I think there are more than 3. I'm not going to get the number right, but we've got several hundred trade commissioners in the Indo-Pacific area, and they're all across the region, and they are every day out there speaking to local businesses and understanding their needs and their interests, and then feeding those back into our offices across Canada. And then they use that and our databases to find Canadians who might be able to respond to those opportunities. We call them up, we talk to them, we present the opportunity, we help them understand how we can de-risk it through partnerships, through other supports, and through giving them the right contacts and putting those pieces together for them. So we really try to do that as much as possible. We also use, just at a very general level, and just going back to the last question, how you get to the very small businesses, which is 93% of our clients are very small, like small and medium-sized businesses. We use search engine optimization and other tools like that, so that when you type Canada and export, you get the Trade Commissioner Service and you get EDC, and they come right up at the very top of the search. So we try to make it as easy as possible for folks to find us, but we do recognize that we need to keep going out into the regions, and that is why we have offices all across the country who do that, who maintain the linkages, and who work with our partners in the provinces, the territories, and the municipalities to try and make it not hard to find us.
Yeah, I would just like to add to that. So whilst the companies in Japan certainly know about Canada and are willing to invest in Canada, we have to broaden that. We actually have to help Canadian companies get into their supply chains. We have to make more Japanese companies interested in what Canadian capabilities looks like. And that's a really important sort of matching activity that both the Trade Commissioner Services and EDC does. So us going in and understanding the needs within Japanese companies and how Canadian companies can support that is a much more aggressive strategy than just waiting for them to come. So we got to get in there. At EDC, we have a couple of programs, a market leader program, where we try to engage with some of the leading companies in these markets to then subsequently introduce Canadian companies to them. We also need to work with the Japanese companies, you chose Japan, that are present in Canada, and how do we introduce them to the supply chain that exists in Canada so that then globally the company starts talking about the talent and the resources that is in Canada. So there isn't one silver bullet. We got to go at this from every angle, and we've got to make sure everyone knows what Canadian companies can do.
All right, that's it. Thank you very much to our witnesses. Apologies for the delay. Thank you for the invaluable information you've given us today. And again, apologies to the second panel that we'll look forward to seeing the next opportunity that we have. So thank you all again. Meeting adjourned.